Welcome back to our walking tour through the land of Israel, also known in the Bible as the land of milk and honey. These last few sessions, we've been getting to know the first half of Israel's name, the land of milk. We've been trekking through the Negev desert, which is home to the shepherds, whose goats were the source of milk for the biblical people. I hope that you've seen in the last few sessions that if we step out of our own experiences and allow the shepherds of the Bible to lead the way, the green pastures, still waters, and overflowing cups can take on a completely new meaning for us. So let's see if we can make the same discoveries in the land of honey, where the ground is better suited to agriculture. We'll begin our journey by heading north about 30 miles, landing in a spot known as Tell Gezer. Notice the difference that a mere 30 miles makes in the landscape here. Because of the patterns of rainfall that we talked about in session 1, this part of Israel is much more fertile than the Negev where we just came from. Things can actually grow here. What you're looking at are the archaeological remains of the once thriving city of Gezer. Quite a few thousand years ago, this was a vital piece of real estate. Maybe this reconstruction will help you get a better idea of what Gezer was like in its prime. Notice two things here. First, the ancient city of Gezer appears at a major crossroads. Do you see how whoever controls Gezer would control the flow of traffic along the roads which it overlooks? In fact, in the ancient world of the Bible, a road known as the Via Maris, or the Way of the Sea, was the primary highway that ran north to south closer in towards the coast. If you recall from session 1, Israel was located square in the path of travel between two world empires of its day, Egypt to the southwest and the Mesopotamian empires, Assyria, then Babylon, and then Persia, to the northeast. And Gezer, it's smack in the center of this ancient highway, which explains why it was so strategic in the biblical period. If we take a second look at the reconstruction, also notice how the city looks like it's built on the flat top of a huge mound. Even today, with the city completely destroyed, you can still get a sense of Gezer's location at the top of an elevated piece of ground. In fact, today this site is called Tell Gezer. The Tell part of the name in Hebrew actually means mound, so this is the mound upon which the city of Gezer once stood. If you find yourself on a walking tour of Israel, especially an archaeological one, you'll come across a lot of these tells, like Tell Lachish, pictured in the upper left, or Tell Megiddo. Notice how these major cities all share this same aspect of being located on the top of an elevated mound. Let's take a closer look at why. For an ancient city to thrive, three things were essential, and they're really not that hard to guess. The first one is water. As we learned in earlier sessions, Israel gets very little rainfall. In fact, rain is only likely to occur on about 60 days per year, and almost all of them are between October to April. In this region of Israel, miles away from the Jordan River or the Sea of Galilee, the only sufficient source of water is going to be a natural underground spring. So the communities of people who settle together and eventually form these cities need to do that in close proximity to one of these springs. Secondly, the inhabitants of the city needed a viable occupation. Whether farming the surrounding plots of land or providing goods and services to those traveling the Via Maris, Gezer's location provided the second factor necessary for the city to thrive. The third thing a city needs is a defensible location. I suspect we underestimate the degree of warfare that was normal in the biblical period, so let me give you an idea. 2 Samuel 11 begins, "In the spring of the year, when the kings normally go out to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army." This points to the fact that warfare in the time of Bible was common. It was even seasonal. So now look again at Gezer's reconstruction. Do you see how it resembles a fortress? It's situated at the flat top of the tell with steep slope leading below. It's surrounded by a wall and it only has one entrance, which is the city gate. So for invaders to conquer the city, they either need to approach it from the main roadway and breach the gate, which of course will be heavily defended, or they need to scale the surrounding slopes and then get over the wall, which is another tough option. So water, viable livelihood, and defensible location all have to come together for a settlement to form. But the reality is that in the territory that we're talking about, this combination was relatively hard to find. So the rare sites which have these three factors in close proximity are highly prized. These spots flourish and become attractive to enemies, and then they get attacked and are destroyed or even abandoned for a time. And then they're eventually resettled by people who come along later. And on that same cycle goes throughout the millennia, and the tell grows taller and taller. The tells of Israel may not look like much from the surface, but they're actually an archaeological treasure, where each layer holds a different phase of history through the artifacts contained there. As part of the preparation for my study tour in 2005, we were assigned to read James Michener's The Source. My copy, 1,078 pages long, so it took a little bit of doing, but it was well worth it to understand a tell like Tell Gezer. The Source weaves a fictional account of an archaeological dig in Israel set at a major tell. Michener describes the tell in this way. The local citizens knew it was not a natural mound laid down by tectonic forces, but the patiently accumulated residue of one abandoned settlement after another, each resting upon the ruins of its predecessor, reaching endlessly back into history. In Michener's story, the team excavates a trench digging down through the layers in the diagram like you see here to discover precious items such as a coin or a shard of pottery or an ancient flint tool or a small stone idol, each in their respective layers, and which all tell a story of the city dwellers in their respective times. Tell Gezer also retains a part of its history above ground, which is a treat. What you're looking at here are the remains of a six-chambered gate identified by many scholars to be from Solomon's time, in about the 10th century BCE. Going back to the Reconstruction drawing gives us a better sense of where we're standing in relation to the entire tell. 1 Kings 9:16 mentions Solomon's building efforts here. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had attacked and captured Gezer. He had set it on fire. He killed its Canaanite inhabitants, and then he gave it as a wedding gift to his daughter, Solomon's wife, and Solomon rebuilt Gezer. This passage also points to the tumultuous and violent history of Gezer. If we were to dig down deep enough into the tell, and many have, we would discover the destruction layer from Egypt's attack on the city, and on top of that, we would find the remains of resettlement in Solomon's time, things like the foundation stones for the six-chambered gate that you're looking at. If we continue to walk higher up the tell, we encounter these large standing stones. The Hebrew word for this is matzavah, or in plural, matzavot. These particular stones are dated to Canaanite times, so they were set in place long before the Israelites arrived here. Scholars are actually unsure why they were first erected. Some speculate that they had a religious significance. Others propose they were placed to commemorate some sort of covenant treaty amongst the Canaanite people. When they were newly erected, they resided at the highest point of the tell. But as you can see, successive generations of Gezer dwellers have added their new layer to the tell, so that eventually these once dominating stones are no longer perched above everything else. Though these standing stones weren't erected by the Israelites, we do see many places in the text where significant events are marked by placing stones. After Moses receives the 10 Commandments from God on Mount Sinai, God and the people are ready to seal the covenant between them. So Exodus 24:3 begins. When Moses went and told the people all the Lord's words and laws, they responded with one voice, "Everything the Lord has said, we will do." And Moses then wrote down everything the Lord had said, and he got up early the next morning, and he built an altar at the foot of the mountain and set up the 12 stone pillars, matzavot, representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Something momentous has taken place, and Moses wants to make sure to set in stone that all generations coming after will remember it. It's often interesting to look at where Hebrew words come from. In this case, matzavah, it means a pillar or a monument or a stone set up as a memorial. It comes from a root word, natsav, to take one's stand for definite purpose. It's not hard to see how these two words relate. It's about standing out, about being distinctive in the landscape so as to draw people's attention and to cause them to notice the uniqueness. Well over 1,000 years after the Canaanites placed these standing stones in the ground so as to arouse both curiosity and wonder, Peter writes to the first followers of Jesus, and you have to read it in the King James to get the point. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth the praises of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Friends, this is the lesson that I take from the standing stones of Tell Gezer. If we are truly following Jesus, we should stand out in the world. We should appear peculiar. The degree to which we forgive, we extend mercy and pursue justice and practice humility should be something that causes people to pause and observe. Something is different about you. What might be the reason for that? And then, if we're lucky, we just might get to the opportunity to show forth the praises of the Lord who has called us. So thanks for journeying along to Tell Gezer and learning its lessons. Join in next time as we walk further into the land of honey. So thanks for coming along on this short journey into the Bible text. I hope you've noticed something new in the landscape, or maybe even a fresh way to view territory that you've covered many times before. Whatever the case, it's good to have you along for the trip. You never know what we might discover as we crack open this fascinating text together.